Quite an afternoon indeed, Ian. This was a massive shock when it dropped early afternoon that the government was effectively abandoning those plans to postpone elections across 30 councils. Now, these were councils who's basically come to the government and said, we would like to delay, effectively cancel for this year those elections. And the government had said, yes, OK. These were places where they were going from two-tier authorities to single unitary councils. And the argument being made by the government was that they basically didn't have the capacity required for the organisation. But as you say, Reform UK took them to court. They wanted to do a judicial review. And they didn't make it that far. The government effectively saying today that they were not going to win. They got this new legal advice. Now, we don't know exactly what was in that legal advice, but we do know that legal advice made them realise they were not going to win, and they pulled out of that decision.
Just on the legal advice, though, a lot of people will say, well, if they've got that legal advice now, shouldn't this have been available to them 2 or 3 months ago when they made this decision to go ahead?
That is a question that's been asked. The point being made is that it sort of all came together pretty last minute, and then they got this solidified legal advice. They wouldn't give exact timelines, but got that legal advice, and it was at that stage, I assume pretty late on, because this has, of course, happened pretty late on, and basically realised that they couldn't win this.
Well, it would be quite interesting to know when they got that legal advice, because you might have expected them, when Parliament was sitting last week, because we're in recess now, to announce it last week. But, of course, politically, possibly it's more convenient to do it when Parliament isn't sitting. And the Lib Dems have capitalised on that. They've demanded to see this legal advice.
I think there'll be so many calls to hear and see that legal advice, exactly what was in it. Because, as you say, the opposition is celebrating. This is how Nigel Farage responded earlier today.
That's why we took them to the High Court. We were due there this Thursday. They've caved, they've collapsed. It's a victory for reform, but more importantly, it's a victory for democracy in this country. We are delighted. I think the principle of no taxation without representation is a very well-known one through political history, and that's what was happening here. We'd even seen a few people starting to refuse to pay their council tax up and down the country. But what I do think now is the Minister, Steve Reid, has clearly acted illegally, and given that the government has now given in, knew they'd lose to us in court, I think Steve Reid's question as a minister should now be debated. We took a risk on this, but we knew it was the right thing to do, and there'll be a lot of people up and down the country very grateful to us.
Is Steve Reid in trouble?
Well, there are calls now for him to resign from Nigel Farage. I think, this is a pretty perilous moment for him. It's very, very difficult. He took a decision that he obviously deemed that he couldn't win or defend in a court of law. Now that decision was effectively sort of taken away from him, made instead by a minister in his department, Matthew Pennycook, who's the Minister for Housing. And now there are massive question marks over what happened, what that legal advice was, and indeed over his position. I think, there was already so much pressure about what was going to happen for the government, for the Labour Party on May the 6th and May the 7th. And I think there will be even more pressure now these local elections are going ahead.
Well, let's get we did actually ask the government to put someone up to talk about this, but they declined the opportunity. I wonder why that would be. Well, two parties who haven't declined the opportunity are Reform UK and the Liberal Democrats, as you might imagine. Darren Grimes joins us, Reform UK Deputy Leader of Durham County Council. Darren, very good evening to you. What's your reaction to this decision today? You must be jubilant.
Oh, absolutely, Ian. I mean, ultimately, for a party that's actually ran by North London lawyers, they don't seem very good at actually interpreting the law. They're about as good at that as they are governing the country. I think actually, Ian, you've been discussing how this is yet another U-turn. We've seen a lot of those, and there is a sort of understood and accepted premise that too many U-turns and you very quickly find yourself in the U-bend politically. Well, I see it more as an act of absolute surrender, Ian, because, to say that you were going to strip 4.6 million people of their democratic voice because you're terrified of the ballot box, well, If Reform did that, Iain, I can bet you my bottom dollar, I would put everything I own on this, that there would be accusations of being in the throes of fascism and all these other lofty claims. But when it's Labour that's trying to do it, it's A-OK. So I'm really pleased that the party took this decision. They, risked money, and now actually it's the taxpayer who's having to stump up, as you say, to help these local authorities run these elections and to actually pay Reform UK our legal costs. It's a totally grotesque situation that we find ourselves in, and it's an utter humiliation for the government.
I suppose, look, I said right from the start here that I thought this was an outrageous decision by the government in terms of democracy. And I think you're right. They were accused of being very authoritarian. The F word wasn't used about them, but it might well have been. But of course, this is going to put the onus back on you to really perform in these elections, because yes. I'm absolutely convinced that one of the reasons that they wanted to cancel them was because they saw the writing on the wall, that they thought they would lose all of the 10 councils that they offered the chance, 10 Labour councils that they offered the chance to cancel the elections, that they would lose those to you. So your party's going to have to step up to the plate now.
Absolutely. We put our money where our mouth is in actually bringing about this legal challenge, and we'll do it again in fighting these elections. We are the only party that fought for democracy. You mentioned the Lib Dems, but one of their local authorities actually stood against these elections going ahead. So, everyone else tried to actually cancel these elections, and Reform has beat them all. I agree there is a significant challenge for us, but I think in what we're managing to do in the 10 local authorities that Reform controls right now, it is actually a lesson to the rest of the country that you will get lower taxes. Reform
hang on a minute.
County Durham,
hang on.
1.99% in County Durham.
Hang on a cotton picking minute. In Kent, where I live, they promised to cut council tax, and they're putting it up by 3.99%.
Well, Kent has been left in an absolutely unimaginable stress, right, because of the previous administrations that have been in control there. I don't envy their position, but they have actually lowered it from the what is the accepted 5% max tax to 3.99. So it's going in the right direction, and I'm confident that the leadership there, who I know and respect enormously, are going to get a grip of this, and we're going to see we are early on the pitch, and we're going to see by the end of full time a better performance than West Ham, Iain.
Well, that wouldn't be difficult at the moment, though. We did beat the mighty Burton Albion yesterday, so thank you very much for that. Let me play devil's advocate, because that's my job here. The argument now, of course, from these 30 councils will be, well, hang on a minute, they may be giving us £63 million to help recruit more staff to run these elections, but we're preparing for the reorganisation. We actually still won't have the capacity to do it. Now, on the face of it, that's a reasonable argument.
Well, we moved from a borough of districts and all the rest of it, a collection of these smaller local authorities, more localised, to a unitary authority. And we didn't cancel elections in that time. I think you can actually do this. You must do this. I think actually we've got to put on elections when they're actually due. I don't think actually this delay is, because as well as I do, Iain, that a delay in government terms very often is expedited and elongated in a really quite troubling way. So I'm not convinced that this wouldn't end up being the HS2 of local government, where it's just kicked down the road and you end up in a bizarre scenario where people for over 7 years have been elected as candidates. At that point, President Xi starts to look a bit jealous, doesn't he?
How's it going in your own council? Because I gather 6 Reform UK councillors have become independent. They're clearly not happy.
Well, no, we had some of them actually leave for health reasons. So we had one leave who had cancer. We had another leave because he took up work elsewhere. But one of them has gone independent recently, yes. And I'm delighted, Iain. It saved me having to do my spring cleaning come this spring. And I'm not a man that's fond of a mop, to be honest.
Leave that to Kemi.
Well, absolutely, absolutely not. Look, the way that party is going, where are they in all of this, right? They were complicit in actually delaying these elections. So I'll take no lectures from the mop from that party.
OK, Darren Grimes, thank you very much for joining us. Darren is Deputy Leader of Durham County Council.